In today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys the pros and cons of every single supercar in GTA 5 Online. It's going to be a pretty great video, and I'm going to try to make it under 10 minutes, so I hope you guys enjoy the video. If you want to see a video on me judging every single sports car in the game in terms of pros and cons, drop a like. Anyways, let's get into how I'm going to be calculating all of this. So we're going to be judging every single supercar on their top speed, price, acceleration, handling. The way I'm going to be judging it on price and the way I'm judging it on the top speed is I've calculated the average top speed of every single supercar in the game and the average price of every single supercar in the game. And if it's in the top 50%, then it's a pro. If it's in the bottom 50%, then it's a con. With that said, I hope you enjoy, and let's get into the test. If you want skins in V-Bucks in Fortnite, want to become max level in Call of Duty, need money in GTA 5, or anything else for a ton of other games, check out Digazani down below in the description and get 10% off your order by using code FROLICS at checkout. The average price of a supercar in GTA 5 is $1.723 million, and the average top speed is 124 miles per hour. So with that said, let's get into the very first car, which is going to be the 811 supercar. Now this car starts at a price of $1.135 million, which is definitely a pro. It is under the average price, which is awesome. In terms of its top speed, it's around 132 miles per hour, which is definitely in the pros column. It's much higher than the average top speed of a supercar in GTA 5 Online. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the 811 is rated 24 out of 49 out of all of these supercars in the game, which just makes it into the top 50%. So that's another pro to this car. So far, there is no cons. In terms of acceleration, it's rated 25 out of 49 supercars in the game, which is not the best, so it is going to be a bit of a con for that. The acceleration on this car is not amazing. Next up, we have the Adder, the first Bugatti in the game. Now this car costs $1 million. That is well below the average price of a supercar, which is awesome, so that's a pro. In terms of the top speed, it's 124 miles per hour. Now don't forget, the average top speed is 124 miles per hour, so it's pretty much average, so we're just gonna say it's average. In terms of handling, traction, and agility, this car falls at number 47 out of 49, which is not that great. I'm definitely going to have to give it a con for its handling, traction, and agility. And in terms of the Adder's acceleration, it falls at number 44 out of all of the supercars in the game, which is not that great. It does not have the best acceleration, but then again, it's a very old supercar, and it is $1 million, so there are a couple pros about the vehicle, but there's also a lot of cons that you definitely need to consider while purchasing it. Next up is the Otarch. Now this car costs $1.95 million, which is well over the average price of a supercar, so we're definitely going to have to give that a con. Now in terms of the top speed, it's 125 miles per hour, which is just a little bit faster than the average top speed of a supercar in GTA 5 Online. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Otarch is rated number 11 out of the 49 supercars in GTA 5, which is actually pretty good, so we're going to give that a pro. In terms of the acceleration on the Otarch, it's rated 6 out of 49, so that's another pro. So far, this car is just amazing. There isn't a single con about it. Next up is going to be the Banshee 900R. Now this car only costs about $665,000, which is very cheap, so that's definitely going to be a pro. The top speed is 131 miles per hour, which is extremely fast, so that's another pro about this car, well over the average top speed. In terms of the handling, traction, and agility of the Banshee 900R, it falls at 46th place, which is not that great. In terms of the acceleration for the Banshee 900R, it's rated 31 out of 49, which is okay, but it's still not in the top 50%. So in terms of pros and cons, the pros, it's cheap and it's fast. The cons are, it doesn't have the best handling, traction, or agility, or the best acceleration. Next up on this list, we have the Bullet. This is a very old supercar. Its price is $155,000, which is well below the average price of a supercar in the game, which is awesome. Its top speed is 118 miles per hour, which is definitely a con. It's not that fast, which is definitely a little bit of an issue there. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Bullet falls at 40th out of 49 supercars in the game, so that's definitely a con there. It's not the best in the game in terms of its handling. And in terms of its acceleration, it is rated 41 out of 49 out of all of the supercars in GTA 5 Online, which is also not that great. But don't forget, the car is definitely a little old, and it's been out for a very long time. So things have changed, which is why this car is so low down on the list. Next up on the list is going to be the Cheetah, a very old supercar that everybody used to drive. This car is only $650,000, so that's definitely a pro. It's fairly cheap. In terms of the top speed, it's 120 miles per hour. That's definitely a con. It is underneath the average top speed of a supercar. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Cheetah falls at 36th place out of 49 supercars in GTA 5. That's not the best, so we're definitely gonna have to say that's a con. In terms of the acceleration of the Cheetah, it falls at 43rd out of 49 out of all of the supercars in the game, which is also another con for this car. Now don't forget, some of these cars are fairly old, which is why their acceleration and handling is just not the best, but honestly, it's still a pretty decent car. Next up is going to be the Coil Cyclone. Now this car costs $1.89 million in GTA 5, which is definitely just a little bit higher up on the list in terms of the cost. And in terms of the top speed, it's only 116 miles per hour. Some of you guys may be like, that's not true. Well, it actually is. Electric cars in GTA 5 do not have extremely high top speeds, and that's when most of the combustion engine vehicles will end up passing by them, but they could still split stream and catch up. So the top speed is definitely below average, so that's another con for this car. In terms of the handling, traction, and agility for the Coil Cyclone, it falls at 48th place out of 49 supercars, which is not that great, I'm not gonna lie. In terms of the acceleration though, it falls at 3rd out of 49 supercars in the game. It's definitely got some amazing acceleration being an electric supercar. So if you guys were to launch with this thing, it will take off in just a couple of seconds. It'll blow by everybody else, but once it reaches its top speed, you're gonna see a lot of cars passing you. Next up is going to be the Devasty 8. Now this car costs $1.795 million, which is just a little bit over the average price of a supercar in GTA 5. So I'm definitely gonna have to say that's just a little bit of a con right there. In terms of the top speed, it's 131 miles per hour, which is pretty fast. A lot faster than the average top speed of any of the supercars in the game, which is awesome. In terms of the handling, traction, and agility, the Devasty 8 falls at number 19 out of 49, which is definitely a pro. It's got some pretty decent handling. In terms of the acceleration, it's actually rated number 1 in the game. Now that doesn't mean it's the number 1 car. It's tied for first, of course, with other cars like the Cyclone, and of course some other ones that we're going to get into during this video. But the acceleration is one of the best in the entire game, which is awesome. Next up, we have the Progen Emerus. Now this car costs $2.75 million in GTA 5, which is much more expensive than the average supercar, which is definitely a con. In terms of its top speed, it's 127 miles per hour, which is pretty fast, and it's just a little bit faster than the average top speed, which is definitely a pro. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Emerus is the 4th best supercar in the game, which is awesome, and I actually can back this up. I know for a fact it's amazing. When you drive it around, it's really easy to handle, and it's the car I pick whenever I do supercar races. In terms of the acceleration, this car falls at 5th out of 49 supercars in the game, so all I'm seeing is the only issue is the price. That's really the only con. Next up is going to be the Entity XF. Now this car only costs $795,000, which is pretty awesome. It's definitely a lot cheaper than the average supercar. In terms of its top speed, it's 121 miles per hour, which is definitely just a little bit lower than the average top speed out of the supercars in GTA 5. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Entity XF is the 18th best in GTA 5 in the supercars category, which is pretty awesome, so that's another pro. In terms of its acceleration though, it's not the best. It's ranked 40 out of 49 in terms of the supercars in GTA 5. Next up is going to be the Entity XXR. Now this car costs $2.3 million, and it is definitely well over the average price of the average supercar, so that's definitely a con. In terms of the top speed though, it has a top speed of 128 miles per hour, which is just a little bit higher than the average of 124, so that is definitely a pro. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Entity XXR is the 10th best out of all of the supercars in GTA 5 Online, which is pretty awesome. And in terms of its acceleration, it falls at 26 out of all of the supercars in the game, which I'm gonna have to say is a con. It is not in the top 50%, but I have to admit, it's still pretty good. Compared to the Entity XF, which is obviously its older counterparts, the newer version is definitely a lot better, but there are some cons. Next up is going to be the ETR1. Now, this car is pretty cool. The price of the car is $1.995 million, which is just a little bit more expensive than the average supercar in GTA 5, so I'm gonna have to say that is a con. In terms of its top speed, it's 120 miles per hour, which is also a little bit lower than the average top speed of the supercars in GTA 5, so that is another con. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the ETR1 is actually the 16th best supercar in the game, and I don't doubt that. It was put into this game for racing, so it better be damn good, so that's definitely a pro. In terms of its acceleration though, it's not the best. It's the 42nd best accelerating supercar in the game out of the 49 that we have. Next up, we have the Vapid FMJ. Now, in terms of its price, it's $1.75 million, just a smidge over the average price of supercars in GTA 5, and its top speed is 125 miles per hour, which is just a little bit over the average top speed, so that's going to be a pro. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's actually the 23rd best in the game, which is actually pretty good, so we're going to have to say that's a pro. And in terms of its acceleration, it actually is the 17th best accelerating car in terms of the supercars in GTA 5, which is pretty shocking. Next up is going to be the Furia. I definitely pronounced that wrong. The cost of this car is $2.7 million, $1 million more than the average price of a supercar in GTA 5, so that's definitely a con. Top speed is 122 miles per hour, 2 miles per hour slower than the average supercar's top speed in this game, so that is definitely another con. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Furia is ranked 20th out of 49 supercars in GTA 5, which is actually pretty good, so that's definitely a pro. In terms of its acceleration, it's actually rated 18th in the game, which is awesome, so there's another pro. The only cons are going to be the top speed and, of course, the price. Next up is going to be the Progen GP1. Now, this car costs $1.26 million, which is a fair bit under the average price of a supercar in GTA 5, so that is definitely a pro. In terms of its top speed, it's 123 miles per hour, just a smidge slower than the average supercar in GTA 5, so we're going to have to say that's going to be a con right there. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the GP1 is ranked 17 out of 49 supercars in the game. That's awesome. That is definitely a pro. In terms of its acceleration, the GP1 is rated 15th out of 49 supercars in the game, which is another pro. This car is a race car. It feels like a race car, it looks like a race car, and it definitely performs like one. The only issue is going to be the top speed. Other than that, I really don't notice any issues with this car. It's pretty amazing. Next up on this list is going to be the Pagassi Infernus. Now, this car only costs $440,000, which is pretty damn cheap, so that's definitely a pro. The top speed is only 117 miles per hour, which is definitely a con. It's pretty damn slow. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Infernus is the 35th best in the entire game out of all of the supercars, and I can definitely see it's not that great, so that's another con. In terms of its acceleration, it is the 36th best in the entire game, so that's another con. Really, the only upside is the fact that it's cheap, but don't forget, it's a very old supercar in GTA 5. I would honestly call it more of a sports car, but if they added like a remastered version of the Infernus into the game, that would be a lot better. Next up, let's go over the Atelier GTB, not the custom version, just the regular version. Now, this car costs $1,189,000, which is definitely cheaper than the average supercar price, which is awesome, so that's definitely a pro. In terms of its top speed, it's 126 miles per hour, another pro. It's definitely pretty fast. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Atelier GTB is the 45th best in the entire game, which is a con. It's definitely not the best. In terms of its acceleration, it is rated 38th best in the entire game, which again is not that great. So next up is the Atelier GTB Custom, and it looks pretty cool. Now, the cost of this car to upgrade it to the custom version will set you back another 500k, while adding in the price of the $1.189 million, it comes out at just over 1.6 million, which is still under the average price of the average supercar, so that's another pro. The top speed is 1 mile per hour faster than the regular Atelier GTB, so there's another pro right there, and of course it is faster than the average supercar. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Atelier GTB Custom is the 25th best in the game. That's going to be a con. It just was a smidge off the top 50%. And in terms of its acceleration, it's the 35th best in the game. Only 2 spots or 3 spots higher than the regular Atelier GTB, which again is still not all that great. So is it actually worth it to upgrade it to the Benny's version? You go 1 mile per hour faster, it's an extra 500k. And really, it doesn't improve the car all that much. The only thing you'll notice is the handling, traction, and agility is just a little bit better than the regular Atelier GTB, but it does tend to understeer while going around turns, which is something I still notice with the custom version. Next up, we got the Krieger. Now, this car costs $2.875 million. Way more expensive than the average supercar in GTA 5, so that's definitely going to be a con. In terms of the top speed, it's 127 miles per hour, which is pretty great. It's about 4 miles per hour faster than the average supercar in GTA 5. That's another pro, which is awesome. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Krieger is the 3rd best in the game. It's definitely really good at it, which is why you see so many people using it in races. And in terms of its acceleration, it is the 9th best in the game. Still definitely a pro, but it's definitely not the best in the game. But it's still really good at accelerating off the line. Next up is going to be the Nero. Not the Nero Custom, just the regular Nero. Now this car only costs $1.44 million on the Benny's Automotive website, which is under the average price of the average supercar, which is awesome, so that's a pro. The top speed of this car is 126.5 miles per hour, just a little bit faster than the average supercar. There's another pro. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Nero is the 34th best in the game. That is going to be a con, it's not in the top 50%. In terms of its acceleration, it's rated 37 in the game out of the 49 supercars. Once again, not in the top 50%. So the pros are obviously going to be the price and the top speed, but it doesn't handle too well and the acceleration isn't that great. So next up, we got the Nero Custom. Now this car has a top speed of 127 miles per hour, 1 mile per hour faster than the regular Nero. And in terms of the cost, you got to upgrade it at Benny's for an additional $600,000, putting the total price of this car at right around $2 million in GTA 5. So that is well over the average price of a supercar, which is going to be a con. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Nero Custom is the 27th best in the entire game in terms of these supercars, which is going to be a con. It just falls short of the top 50%. And in terms of its acceleration, it's rated the 33rd best in the game out of 49 supercars, only, 4 spots higher than the regular Nero. So, once again, is it really worth it to actually upgrade these cars at Benny's if they're really not going to perform so much better? You could use the regular version of the car and still beat people using the Nero Custom if you're a good driver. Next up, we have the Osiris. Now this car costs $1.95 million, just 200k more than the average supercar, but we're going to have to say that's a con. In terms of its top speed, it has a top speed of 122 miles per hour, 2 miles per hour lower than the average top speed of the supercars in GTA 5, so we're going to have to say that's another con. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Osiris is the 33rd best supercar in the game, which is not terrible, but it's not in the top 50%, so that's going to be another con. And in terms of its acceleration, it's rated 29th in the game, which is again not in the top 50%. So, while looking at this car, it doesn't really have any pros in terms of all of the stats that we just took a look at. It's not too fast, it's too expensive, it doesn't handle that well, and it doesn't accelerate that well either. Is there anything that's actually good about this car? Honestly, the only thing I like is the fact that it's a Pagani. Next up is going to be the Ocelot Penetrator. Now, I actually used to race this car a lot back in the day. Anyways, the price is only $880,000. Definitely a pro, a lot cheaper than a lot of supercars in the game. In terms of its top speed, it's actually average, 124 miles per hour on the dot. So it's pretty average in terms of that. We'll say that's a pro, I would say. In terms of its handling, agility, and traction, the penetrator is the 39th best in the entire game, which is not that great, so that's going to be a con. And in terms of its acceleration, it's ranked 47th best in the game, which again is going to be a con. But don't forget, if you guys are like, these stats don't make sense, I'm so good at driving this car, maybe because you're just a good driver. You're just going to have to admit it. Just admit it, you're a good driver. That's it, end of story. Next up, we have the RE7B. Now, this car costs a total of $2.47 million. Definitely more expensive than the average supercar, so that's going to be a con. And its top speed is 123 miles per hour, which is just a smidge slower than the average supercar, so we're going to have to say that is also going to be a con. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's ranked 14th out of the 49 supercars in the game, which is actually pretty good. It's a race car, it's supposed to be good, so obviously the handling is pretty amazing, so that's going to be a pro. In terms of its acceleration, it's ranked the 12th best in the entire game out of all of the supercars, which is pretty awesome. I remember this car used to be the best car in the game until it was nerfed, and honestly it's still pretty good to this date. Next up we have the Pagassi Reaper, one of my favorite cars in the game. Its price is $1.59 million, just a little bit cheaper than the average supercar, so that's going to be a pro. In terms of its top speed, it's 122 miles per hour, just a little slower than the average top speed, so that's going to be a con. In terms of its handling, it's ranked 28th best out of all of these supercars in GTA 5, which is just a little bit outside of the top 50%, which is going to be a con. In terms of its acceleration, though, it is the 19th best in GTA 5 out of all of the supercars, which is going to be a pro. It takes off pretty quick and doesn't take that long to reach its top speed, but its top speed is not that high, which is going to be, like I said, one of the cons, and it does not handle that well. Next up is going to be the Rocket Voltic. Now, this car, I'm going to have to give it kind of an exemption, but I'm still going to tell you guys the stats. So the cost of this car is $3.8 million, well over the average price of a supercar. In terms of its top speed, it can reach a top speed of around 124 miles per hour, which is just about average, which is actually pretty decent. In terms of its handling, agility, and traction, it's going to be rated 43 out of all of the supercars in the game, obviously because it has a fucking rocket engine on the back. It's pretty hard to control. Its acceleration is not that great. Not including the rocket booster here, it's a Voltic. It really does not have the best acceleration in the game, and when you take off the line, it takes a little bit of time to actually get going. Even though it is an electric car, it really does not have the best acceleration, but when of course you use that rocket booster, you will literally just take off and fly. Next up, let's take a look at the S80RR. Now, this car costs a grand total of $2.5 million. It's about $1 million more expensive than the average supercar, so I'm gonna have to say that is gonna be a con. In terms of its top speed, it's 123 miles per hour, which is just 1 mile per hour slower than the average supercar. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's the 5th best in the game, which is actually really good, so we're gonna have to say that's a pro. In terms of its acceleration, this is actually the 10th best accelerating car in GTA 5. You would expect it to be pretty damn good, considering it's a full-on race car. It's pretty much the better version of the RE7B in terms of its stats. It's just a little bit better, and in terms of its speed, I think the RE7B is just a little bit faster and a little cheaper. But the S80 is definitely a pretty great car. Next up is going to be the SC1, which is a car that we don't really see too much in GTA 5. Now, in terms of this car's cost, it's $1.6 million, just a little bit cheaper than the average supercar, which is awesome, so that's definitely a pro. Its top speed is only 120 miles per hour, but it feels faster than that. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the SC1 is ranked 29th out of the 49 supercars that we have in GTA 5, which is going to be another con. And in terms of its acceleration, we're going to have to put it at rank 45, which is also not that great. Next up, let's take a look at the SCRAMJET, another vehicle we're going to have to exempt pretty much from this list, pretty much. I don't know. Anyways, the cost, $4.6 million. Well over the average price of a supercar in GTA 5 Online. In terms of its top speed, 137 miles per hour. That is pretty damn fast for a supercar in GTA 5. So we're definitely going to have to give that a pro. But don't forget, that is using the rocket boost. Without the rocket boost, the top speed is not all that great. Without the rocket boost, I was reaching speeds of about 110, 111, 112, but don't forget, this car is pretty much exempt from this. It's a supercar, but it's a crazy supercar. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's actually the 21th best in the game, which is pretty damn good, so we're gonna have to give that a pro. In terms of its acceleration, it's the second best in the game. Of course, this thing just shoots off the line. It accelerates amazing because of the freaking rocket boost. But we're gonna have to exempt it from this. But then again, it's not really meant for racing. It's meant for just literally having a blast. So its acceleration is pretty damn good. Next up is going to be the SULTAN RS. Now, I really don't know why this is actually a supercar. I'm not gonna lie. Anyways, the price is about $795,000, which is pretty cheap. That's definitely gonna be a pro. Top speed, it's only 117 miles per hour. That's pretty slow, and it's going to definitely be under the average of the average supercar. But then again, I classify this thing more as a sports car. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, compared to the other supercars in the game, it's ranked 44. But then again, this thing is more of a sports car, not really a supercar. And its acceleration is ranked 39 out of the 49 supercars we have in the game. Another con. But then again, like I said, this thing is more of a sports car, not really a supercar. I really don't know why it's classified as a supercar. It definitely shouldn't be. It's a sports car at heart. Next up, we got the Progen T20. Now, this car costs $2.2 million. Well, a little bit more expensive than the average supercar, so that's going to be a con. The top speed is 122 miles per hour, a little lower than the average supercar, so that's going to be a con as well. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the T20 is rated the 33rd best out of the 49 supercars we have, which is not in the top 50%, so that's going to be a con. Its acceleration, on the other hand, is rated 28th best in the game, which is still not in the top 50%. So in terms of comparing it to other supercars, it's got all cons, left and right. So I would honestly stay away from it if you're looking for a great car to race with today. Next up is going to be the TAIPAN. Now, this car costs $1.9 million, just a little bit more than the average price of a supercar in the game, so that's going to be a con. In terms of its top speed, it's 126 miles per hour, which is actually pretty fast, so that's going to be a pro. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the TAIPAN is ranked 9th out of the 49 supercars we have in GTA 5, which is pretty good, another pro. In terms of its acceleration, it's ranked 24th out of all of the supercars we have in the game. It's a big-ass supercar, guys. It's huge. It's one of the biggest ones we got, so it's pretty damn slow. Next up, we got the Tempest. Now, this car costs $1.3 million, well under the price of the average supercar, so that's going to be a pro. Top speed-wise, not that great, 121 miles per hour, so that's going to be a con. In terms of its handling, agility, and traction, it's rated 31 out of the 49 supercars that we have in-game, which again is not that great, so it's going to be a con. And in terms of its acceleration, it's actually pretty good. It's ranked 23 out of the 49 supercars we have, so that's going to be a pro. Honestly, this car is a pretty popular car. It's got some good things and some bad things. It's a little cheap, not the best top speed, great acceleration, not the best handling. It's like, it depends what you're looking for in a car. Next up is going to be the Tesseract. Now, this car costs $2.825 million, which is a little bit more expensive than we like, and that's going to be a con. And in terms of its top speed, it's 125 miles per hour, just a little bit faster than the average top speed of the supercars in GTA 5, which is actually pretty good. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's ranked 8th, which is actually pretty good, so that's going to be another pro. In terms of its acceleration, the Tesseract is actually the 16th best accelerating car in the game. Even though it is electric, it does go off the line pretty quick. It does not lose traction that easily. The issue is it doesn't get up to that speed that quick, so that's going to be why it's not ranked super high on acceleration. But once it gets going, it goes up pretty quick to its top speed, which is awesome. But off the line, it does not accelerate that well compared to some of the other cars we got. Next up is going to be the Thorax. Now, this car costs $2.3 million, just a little bit over the average cost of a supercar in GTA 5. Its top speed is 124 miles per hour, just about average. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Thorax is actually the 6th best in the game, so that's definitely going to be a pro. In terms of its acceleration, though, it is the 32nd best in the game, which is going to be a con. One thing I noticed with this car is it understeers a lot, like a lot, which is why a lot of people don't prefer to use this while racing compared to the Nero Custom. Next up, we got the Tiguan. It costs $2.3 million. That's too much money. It's definitely going to be a con. In terms of the top speed, 125 miles per hour. That's going to be a pro. It's just a little bit faster than average. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's actually ranked number 1 in GTA 5 out of all of the other supercars we have in the game, and I know that's true. This car is amazing. And in terms of its acceleration, it's also really good. It's ranked number 4 out of 49 supercars in GTA 5 Online, which is another pro. So this car is pretty great. The only issue is really the price. It's pretty damn expensive. Next up, we got the Turismo R. We're just gonna go over this for fun, and yeah, I feel really old now. This car used to be awesome. But anyways, the cost of this car is only 500k. Dirt cheap. You guys can buy like 7 of them. But that's definitely a pro. In terms of its top speed, is 121 miles per hour. Definitely going to be a con. Not too fast anymore. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's ranked 37. Like I said, for other older cars, honestly, it's just because it's old and it can't compete with some of the other ones that we got. In terms of its acceleration, it actually beats out a few cars. It's ranked 30th out of all of the supercars we have in GTA 5, and that's actually pretty good. Props to the Turismo. Next up is going to be the Tyrants. Now this car costs $2.5 million, well over the average price of a supercar in GTA 5 Online. The top speed though is 127 miles per hour. That's pretty fast, so that's definitely going to be a pro. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's actually the 6th best in the game, which is also pretty damn good. Another pro right there. In terms of its acceleration, it's not the best. It's a big-ass car. It's ranked 34th out of all of the cars we have in GTA 5 Online, so that's definitely going to be a con right there. Next up is going to be the Titres. I've hated this car since it was released, so let's see how it compares to some of the other cars in the game. First up, the cost. It's going to be a con. It's $2.5 million, well over the average price of a supercar in the game. Top speed is 123 miles per hour, just a little bit slower than the average supercar in GTA 5. Another con. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's actually ranked 15th. One below the RE7B and one above the ETR1. It is a race car, so I guess it's okay. And in terms of its acceleration, it's actually ranked 11th. Just one higher than the RE7B and a fair bit higher than the ETR1, so that's going to be another pro. Personally, I just don't like the car because I just don't like the car, and that's my opinion. But it actually is a pretty decent car. The only issue I see is it's not the fastest car, and it's a little expensive. Next up is going to be the Vodka. I know what you're saying. That is not a Vodka. That is a Lamborghini Huracan, but I replaced the skin. So it's still a Vodka underneath. Just letting you guys know about that. That's why the spoiler's glitching out and there's something glitching through the windows. Just so you guys know. Anyways, the Vodka is $240,000. It's pretty damn cheap, which is definitely a pro. The top speed is 120 miles per hour, which is a con. It's not too fast. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's the 38th best in the game. Obviously, it's an old car. It's not the best. And even when it was in the game a long time ago and it was in its prime, it still wasn't the best compared to some of the other supercars we had. And in terms of its acceleration, also not the best, ranked 46th out of all of the supercars we have in GTA 5. Next up, we have the Wegener. Now this is pretty much the most average supercar you can get. Let's see if the stats match up with that. So the cost, $1.5 million. Just a little bit under the average cost of a supercar in GTA 5. In terms of its top speed, 127 miles per hour. It's pretty fast, so that's definitely going to be a pro as well. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Wegener is ranked 13th best in the game. It's not the best, but it's still pretty damn good, so that's going to be another pro. In terms of its acceleration, it is 14th out of all the supercars we have in the game. Another pretty awesome pro. So this car is actually pretty good. It's known as the car that beginners should start off with, because it's honestly a great car. Next up, we have the Vigilante. This thing's crazy, guys. $3.7 million for this car. Definitely very expensive, more expensive than the average supercar. Top speed 147 miles per hour. Holy shit, that is fast as hell. Of course, that is with the rocket boost, so it is exempt from this list. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, You guessed it, the Vigilante is 49th. It's the worst handling supercar in the entire game. And in terms of its acceleration, without the rocket booster, it's not that great. This thing is not the fastest accelerating car in the game, but when you activate that rocket booster, you already know this thing is gonna fly. And of course, that is how it will reach that crazy top speed of like 147 miles per hour, which is just insane. So, like I said, with this car, the SCRAMJET Rocket Voltic, these are fun cars, not really supercars. They're crazy cars. Next up, we have the Vision. I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's just the Vision. I don't really know. Anyways, cost $2.2 million. That's a little more expensive than the average supercar in the game, so that's going to be a con. The top speed, though, is going to be 125 miles per hour, just a little faster than the average supercar, so that's going to be a pro. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's actually ranked 12th out of all of the supercars we have in the game, which is going to be another pro. In terms of its acceleration, it's ranked 13th in the game, which is going to be another pro. So this car is honestly pretty great, it's a little expensive. Next up, we have the Voltic and the Voltic Topless. I'm going to put these two in the exact same spot. And yes, this is a Tesla Roadster. I know, it's still a Voltic underneath, but it's a Tesla Roadster in my GTA 5 game, okay? Okay, good. Anyways, the Voltic. $150,000 for both the regular and the topless version. There's really no difference. And the top speed is 106 miles per hour. It's slow as shit. It's honestly just slow as shit. The handling on the Voltic and the Voltic Topless is the 41st and the 42nd best in the game. It's terrible. It's not great at all. In terms of the acceleration on both of these cars, though, it's actually ranked 21st and 22nd, which is actually a pro. The acceleration is actually pretty good on it. It is an electric car, and for some reason, the Voltics are better than the Rocket Voltic in terms of acceleration. It's probably because of that gigantic rocket engine it has on the back of it. Next up is going to be the X80 Proto, probably one of the most hated supercars and most loved supercars in GTA 5. The cost is $2.7 million. It's pretty wild. It's pretty high up there. So that's definitely going to be a con. The top speed is 127 miles per hour, which is actually really good. So that's going to be another pro. In terms of its handling, it's actually rated 22nd best in the game, which is pretty decent. That's going to be another pro. And in terms of its acceleration, it's actually rated the 7th best in the game. Honestly, that's pretty decent. The only downside to the car is the fact that it costs nearly $3 million to purchase. But one thing I noticed, it does take flight a lot, and I've noticed that in many races. Next up, we got the XA21. Now this car costs $2.3 million, just a little bit more than the average supercar, and its top speed is only 122 miles per hour, which is going to be another con, not that fast. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's ranked 26th best in the game, just a little outside the top 50%, but it's still pretty decent. In terms of its acceleration, on the other hand, it's actually the 20th best in the game, which is pretty good. So that's definitely going to be a pro. Next up is going to be the Zentorno. It only costs $725,000, which is definitely a pro. It's pretty cheap. And its top speed is 122 miles per hour. That's going to be a con, a little bit slower than the average supercar. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, it's going to be rated 30th out of all of the supercars in GTA 5. And in terms of its acceleration, it's ranked 27th best in the game, which is pretty decent, but still not in the top 50%. I have to say though, in terms of the old supercars in the game, the Zentorno is hands down the best one that we have. So if you wanted to use an older car, the Zentorno is definitely your best bet. And the final car we have for today is going to be the Zoruso. Costs $1.9 million, a little bit more than the average supercar, so that's going to be a con. The top speed is average at 124 miles per hour, which is pretty decent. In terms of its handling, traction, and agility, the Zoruso is actually the second best in the game, which is pretty awesome. And in terms of its acceleration, it's ranked 8th best in the entire game, which again, is pretty awesome. The one thing I noticed with this car though, it definitely understeers. You have to really hit the brakes for this thing to turn, but that's because the handling is so great on it, you'll never spin out. So that's definitely an upside. Anyways guys, that's pretty much going to wrap up the video for today. That is every single supercar, the pros, cons, how great they are in GTA 5 Online. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want to see a list of all of the supercars rankings, they're up on screen right now. And if you want to know where I got all of these stats from, it's from GTA Base, one of the best sites to rank any car in GTA 5. Their link is down below in the description, so go check them out if you want to look further into some of the stats for some of these cars. Anyways, thank you guys for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in the next one.